Hello, and welcome to my channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud. This is Little Blue Book. It happens to be Little Blue Book number 150, entitled Lost Civilizations, written by Charles J. Finger, and is copyrighted in 1922. This is part 2. We left off at the top of page 11, and a new chapter begins, and that new chapter is titled Chaldea. Astronomy suggests the Chaldeans, who dwelt in what is now a desolate valley on the western frontier of Persia, but which was the seat of one of the oldest of extinct civilizations. The early Chaldeans probably came from lands to the northeast, bringing with them a learning and culture such as to suggest that both Chinese and Egyptians owed much to them. Their first ruler in the land of their adoption was Hammurabi, 2100 BC, whose native town was Babylon. His work of engineering was the Great Canal, a mighty excavation which, centuries later, was still an object of wonder and admiration. The Akkads, over which Hammurabi ruled, had high taste for the fine arts, and there are admirable specimens still extant of their skill and delicate handiwork, in the shape of seals of semi-precious stone, beautifully engraved and polished. The cuneiform inscriptions on their tablets, translated by the aid of the Rosetta Stone, shown that with them music was an important branch of study, and that they were familiar with the harp, the pipe, and the cymbals, as might be expected from a people of such taste in their social and domestic relations. They were simple and kindly, showing a special attention to mothers of families. There was a system of apprenticeship, and a wife could own property apart from her husband. All children were taught to read and write. Among them were dyers, weavers, smiths, votters, V-O-T-T-E-R-S, potters. The bottom of the P is missing. Potters and carpenters. On the records printed on clay tablets are found land leases and decisions with precedents quoted by judges reaching back still further in time. One tablet found contained the squares and cubes of a series of numbers, and there were also calculations of area. Some inscriptions were written in very minute characters, and the fortunate discovery of some lenses of glass seems to prove not only that reading glasses were known, but perhaps telescopes. At any rate, the existence of the latter is implied by references on some of the astronomical tablets to the 4 moons of Jupiter. Layard, the explorer and student, unearthed from a mound near the city of Nineveh a wonderful collection of bowls, cups, and dishes of bronze, many of beautiful design, besides kettles, shields, armor, and a great number of buttons and brooches of ivory, metal, and mother of pearl. Several vessels were of glass. The remains of a massive chair or throne, together with small inscriptions, showed that by great good fortune Layard had hit upon the remains of a palace of a monarch who lived 25 centuries ago. New chapter. Egypt. Long before 4000 BC, the dwellers in the Nile Valley excelled the neighboring states and all Europe in culture and science as well as in wealth. They seem to have been peaceful and of simple taste, living for countless generations an active and happy life, engaged in agriculture, the rearing of sheep and cattle, and, judging from the pictures on ancient tombs, cultivating large estates well stocked with flocks and herds, antelopes, storks, and geese. They used the boomerang, spear, and lasso. Huntsmen had their trained dogs, ladies of fashion their pets, and children their toys. They indulged in wrestling, gymnastics, juggling, ball games, and a kind of chess or checkers. The pyramids, supplemented by records and tombs paintings, reveal a people skilled in agriculture, architecture, mechanics, and engineering, and, like the Chaldeans, they were learned in astronomy. The painted records picture pottery making, the use of the blowpipe in glass manufacture, and goldsmith work, as well as the processes of washing and smelting ore. Before 4000 BC, bronze was constantly used, but iron appears in an early picture of some butchers at work sharpening their knives. In a painting some 4,000 years old is shown sick and wounded animals being treated. There have been found brass vessels of great antiquity with designs cleverly wrought, and mummies with artificially glazed eyes have been examined, which show that the process of vitrifying was known even before the pyramids were built. According to Culver, the naturalist, they had advanced so far in the art of surgery as to set the thigh bone of an ibis, which had been fractured. The chief city was Memphis, many centuries older than the pyramids, founded by Menza, the earliest king of whom there is record. He caused a canal to be dug in such fashion as to turn the river into an artificial channel, to serve as protection against invasion from the desert to the east. Of Memphis nothing now is left but the royal tombs, that of the sacred Apia being, according to Mr. Poole, a stupendous excavation. A series of grand galleries with chambers each large enough to hold the massive sarcophagus of a mummified bull. An earlier description was given by an Arabian traveler from Baghdad in the 13th century A.D., who described the wonderful size and beauty of the temple pt2, with its monolithic shrine 8 cubits in length and 9 in height, its doors swinging on the stone hinges, its statues of lions and men, and its stately pillars and masonry. The most impressive monument of ancient Egypt is the Temple of Nu, perhaps one of the grandest structures in the world, judging by the varied styles of the surrounding temples, the countless inscriptions, and the vivid paintings. We get a record of 2,000 years of Egyptian history. The central hall of assembly would hold the Cathedral of Notre Dame, and is supported by 134 columns with a grand gateway more than 360 feet wide. On the opposite bank of the river was the great statue of Ramses, the broken masses of which weigh some 900 tons. The greatest monolithic statue in the world. It was this Ramses who caused temples to be constructed out of a rock near the second Nile cataract. One of the 4 colossal figures, 90 feet high, seated in front of a sculptured facade of 100 feet. The impressive effect of this massive group, says Professor Anderson, rivals that produced by a first sight of the Falls of Niagara or Mont Blanc. As might be expected, visitors from all lands and of many generations have not failed to leave their inscriptions. One in Greek letters bears a date from the 7th century BC. Some slight indication of the ethical standards of the ancient people is shown by the papyrus inscription. Take as a sample this: Happiness finds every place alike good, but a little misfortune will abuse a very great man. A good word shines more than an emerald in the hand of a slave who finds it in the mire. The wise man is satisfied with his knowledge. His heart is well pleased, sweet are his lips. The disobedient sees knowledge in ignorance, virtue in vice. His daily life is what the wise man knows to be death, and curses follow him as he walks in his ways. M. Prissy d'Avennes, the learned French Egyptologist, has shown that the early Egyptians and not the Phoenicians we owe our alphabet. It is sufficiently proved by the papyrus in the Bibliothèque Nationale Paris, actually the oldest book in the world. It consists of 18 pages written in black ink with a bold round character, the prototype of the letters copied by the Greeks from the Phoenicians and transmitted through the Latins to us. New chapter. Arabs. Perhaps no better proof of the antiquity of the Arab can be adduced than the high perfection of the Arab horse, the result of countless generations of care, effort, and observation. It is in itself sufficient evidence of a high civilization, and in this one respect we of today are slowly achieving what the Arabs completed thousands of years ago. Modern civilization owes much more than this to the Arab, and in many branches of science the words still used exist as indications of origin: algebra, alchemy, alkali, alcohol, almanac, elixir, talisman, zero, azimuth, nadir, zenith, to cite a few that leap to mind. Their literature, too, is perfectly rich, though thus far few of the West have given it much study. Sir Richard Burton and Wilfred Scawen Blunt are notable exceptions. Arabian theories of finance have been made known to us recently by Nicholas P. Agnides, Columbia University, 1916, and the origins of the Islamic State by Kitab Futah al-Baldan was printed by the same institution in the same year and translated by P.K. Hitti. The Arab belongs to the Semitic division of the white men and is akin to the Hebrew as well as the Assyrian, but superior to either in physique as well as in mental and moral qualities. He is tall and handsome, well-formed and muscular, with black eyes and hair, white teeth and skin, always scrupulously clean. Independence looks out of his glowing eyes. Courage, temperance, hospitality, and good faith are his leading virtues, says one observer. I like the Muslim, said General Gordon. He is not ashamed of his God. His life is a fairly pure one. Burton and Cunningham Graham speak in the highest praise of his temperance and fairness. Frederick Harrison told of his acceptance of the Muslim religion. The Arab has never submitted to foreigners, and when the conqueror Alexander reached Asia, and all peoples and states seemed to be submitting to him or sending envoys to avoid a war, the Arabs stood apart in dignity. But while their want of a common tie, political or religious, kept them from defeat of an invader, it has also kept them from becoming formidable as conquerors. There was no common bond, no unity until 569 A.D. Muhammad was born in the city of Mecca. Tradition has it that heaven and earth were agitated that night. Lake Siwa, we are assured, shrank back to its secret springs, and the sacred fire of Zoroaster, which had burned without interruption for 1,000 years, was suddenly extinguished. and all the idols in the world fell down. The mother of the prophet suffered none of the pangs of travail, and the newborn child exclaimed, Allah Akbar, God is great. There is no God but God, and I am his prophet. But miracle or no miracle, the child grew to become one who bent to his will one of the most powerful nations that ever existed. As a camel boy in his uncle's service, his thoughtfulness and sincerity was remarked. This deep-hearted son of the wilderness, says Carlyle, with his beaming black eyes and an open social soul, had other thoughts in him than ambition. Then came the day when he began to summarize his system of religious belief and found one of the leading faiths of humanity. All was summed up in two phrases, Allah Akbar, God is great. One and I am, meaning submission. He was persecuted by his own tribe, escaped in disguise, and fled to Medina. That was in the year 622 A.D. There he was received and heard to such good end that 7 years later he made a pilgrimage to his own town at the head of 2,000 followers, seized the capital by force of arms, and laid down the injunction accepted by Muslims everywhere. There was commendable brevity. First, the duty of piety toward Allah. Second, righteousness toward fellow man and protection of the weak, the poor, and the women. See booklet in this series, number 121, Proverbs of Arabia, in exemplification. Within 6 years from the death of Muhammad in 632, the whole of Arabia was converted to the new creed. Jerusalem had capitulated, Damascus was taken, and the Arabs were masters of the district extending from the mountains of Asia Minor to the Red Sea, and in 641 A.D. the whole of Persia had come under Muslim rule. India was soon conquered, and the westerly progress of the Arabian armies began to startle the world south of the Mediterranean. In a few years, the authority of the Greeks was completely destroyed in northern Africa, then followed by the invasion of Spain and the march on to the north, ended by the decisive battle of Tours in 732. For 6 days the battle held, and victory rested with Charles Martel of France, with 300,000 Muslims left dead on the field. But for that, says the historian Gibbon, perhaps the interpretation of the Quran would now be taught in the schools of Oxford, and her pupils would demonstrate to a circumcised people the sanctity and truth of the revelation of Muhammad. The Moorish Mohammedans were not finally expelled from Spain until 1609. See also Life of Muhammad in this series. New chapter, Persia. When the Arabs entered Persia, the defenders, exhausted by foreign wars and internal strife, abandoned Ctesiphon, their capital, and an Arabian writer described in glowing colors the rich treasure that thus became theirs. He tells especially of the royal palace, with its portico of 12 marble pillars, each 150 feet in height, the vaulted roof dazzling the eye with its golden stars, and of the great carpet of brocade, 450 feet long, with a border of precious stones, representing a flower garden, the leaves being emeralds, the blossoms and buds of pearls, rubies, sapphires, and other precious stones. 1/5 of the booty was sent to Media, and the rest divided among the Muslim soldiers. The amount, according to Professor G. Rawlinson, being significant to give each of the 60,000 Arab fighters a sum equivalent to $1,500 at a latter day. And in the battle of Jalula, where 100,000 Persians fell, each Arab had as his share a sum equal to $1,300. That was in the year 642 A.D. It is very clear that a country possessing such wealth, not only in things intrinsically valuable, but in architecture, in literature, in agriculture, had roots stretching far back into a past unknown to its rude conquerors. The oldest city within the borders of Persia was Bactria, often referred to by Hindu ancient writers, but the date and details of its civilization are long past recall. As usual, the earliest records center about religion, the prophet of the ancient Persians having been named Zarathustra, whose Zen Avesta, or Bible, dates to about 1000 BC. For anything very definite, we have to refer to Herodotus, the historian, who lived about 424 BC. Writing of the Persians of his own time, he says, "They have no images of the gods, no temples or altars, and consider the use of them a folly." He describes the city of Hammurabi. "The walls are of great strength, 7 in number, rising in circles, one within another, so that each should by its battlement on top, the one outside of it. The battlements of the outer wall are white, the next black, the third scarlet, the fourth blue, the fifth orange, and the last 2 silver and gold." Much of the grandeur told of by Herodotus was due to Cyrus the king, who made it his capital a century before Herodotus lived. In 331 BC, Alexander the Great found it rich in booty. The verifiable history of Persia commences in 539 BC, when Cyrus became king and conquered Asia Minor. His son, Cambyses, carried the Persian arms into Egypt, meeting the pharaoh at Pelusium on the east of the delta and completely routing the Egyptians. Herodotus found the bones of the combatants on the battlefield in the following century. One incident is worth recalling. Cambyses sent a Persian herald up the river to Memphis to offer terms, but the citizens destroyed the ship and cut all on board to pieces. This piece of savagery hastened the siege of the capital, which soon fell into the hands of the Persians. Then, with savage severity, Cambyses exacted a punishment for the death of the herald and his companions, such as Herodotus loves to detail. 2 of the items were, first, that the pharaoh's daughter, accompanied by the maiden daughters of the chief Egyptian nobles, should be clad as slaves and carry water before the eyes of their fathers, and second, that the pharaoh's son, accompanied by 2,000 Egyptians of the same age, with ropes about their necks and bridles in their mouths, should walk in procession to a place of execution in order to be cut to pieces as the Persian herald had been. At Sayes, Cambyses exhibited further gross barbarities by outraging the mummified corpse of Ramses, the previous pharaoh, on account of his having insulted the Persian monarchy. The fragments of the mummy were thrown into the fire, an act of impiety, as Herodotus points out, to the Persians no less than to the Egyptians. But the Egyptian expedition failed, the Persians, unused to a desert country, becoming demoralized, and Cambyses, whose later act shows him to have been insane, put an end to himself. In the meantime, in Persia, after a short revolution, Darius Histippus had become king, 521 BC, and here history is well confirmed by the chance discovery of a rock inscription left from remote antiquity. This record is the rock of Beheshtun, near the caravan route between Baghdad and Hamadan, a hill which rises to the height of 1,700 feet, Professor Anderson. On the limestone surface of one perpendicular face of this rock, the largest page of history known, are engraved 5 extensive columns in Persian Median, and Babylonian, the whole of them being in cuneiform characters, giving the genealogy of Darius up to Archimedes, the provinces of the Persian Empire, and the victory gained by the great king between 521 to 518 BC. On the upper part of the rock is sculpted a large group. Darius himself, with a bow in his hand and his foot upon the prostrate figure of Smaradis, while nine rebels, chained together by the neck, stand before him, and 2 of his own captains behind him. Above the group hovers the symbolical image of Ormuzd. Every paragraph of this huge inscription mentions Darius as the author, as a guarantee of his accuracy. A few extracts from this unique record follow. When Cambyses had gone to Egypt, the state became heretical. Falsehood abounded in the land, both in Persia and Media, and in other provinces. The crown or empire of which Gometes dispossessed Cambyses, that crown had been in our family from ancient times. The state feared to resist him, Gometes and Magin. There was not anyone bold enough to oppose him till I came. Then I remained in worship of Ormuzd. Ormuzd brought help to me. In the district on Media, named Nisra, there I slew him, Gometes. I dispossessed him of the empire. By the grace of Ormuzd I became king. Ormuzd granted me the scepter, the crown that had been wrested from our race that I recovered. The rites that Gometes the Marian had introduced I prohibited. I reinstituted for the state the sacred chants and worship. And I think we'll end there.